Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, Bree's Toys and Games. My name is Stephanie Bree, and today I have in my hands the 6th edition Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook. I am not going to call it the 2024 edition, and I'm just going to throw this out there. Wizards doesn't have to call this 6th edition for me to call it 6th edition. They don't call the 2014 Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and yet everybody calls it 5th edition. So let's get that the fuck out of the way. This book is way thicker than the 5th edition handbook, Player's Handbook, and I've already gone through it all. They have made game-breaking modifications and changes to this game that are not compatible with 5th edition. This is a new edition of the game, whether you like it or not. I'm not going to discuss it with anybody. I'm not going to have an argument. I'm just going to tell you this book is too thick compared to the previous edition. And there's too many changes. This is not a revision. This is not an update. It is an entirely new edition. I don't care if it says 6th edition or not, because 5th edition doesn't say 5th edition, and yet everybody just knows, because they're not, or they weren't stupid in 2014, that was 5th edition. So why did everybody get stupid all of a sudden and they refuse to call this 6th edition when it is? I don't know. But there are more significant irreconcilable differences and changes from 5th edition to this version than there were between 1st edition and 2nd edition. Now that we got that out of the way, let's look at the book. Nice little graphic here in the middle. Pretty cool. Pretty standard for a player's handbook. You know, it's got the table of contents. Welcome to adventure. What you need to play the game. Playing the game. You know, the abilities, ability checks, saving throws, attack rolls, advantage, disadvantage, proficiency, actions, social interaction, exploration rules, combat rules, damage and healing rules, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then you get to Chapter 2, creating a character. Here's where some of the significant changes come into play. The way you create a character is different. The core is the same across the board all the way since 1974. You know, race, class, your 6 ability scores, and then you just sort of go from there. But this one, they don't call it race anymore. They call it species and origin, which is weird. But it is what it is. I don't care, whatever. And then they talk a little bit about the different types of classes. Way more detail in each class than there was in 5th edition. And new races that are not in 5th edition. And the racial classes have been changed. Not just being changed from name to species or whatever. But significant changes. Too many changes. Yeah, you can make 5th edition product work with 6th edition. You can make 5th edition product work with 3rd edition. Or 2nd edition. Or 1st. Or BECMI. Or whatever. If you have to modify the game at all from one version to the next, it's a new edition. I'm sick and tired of you idiots that are too stubborn to realize that. God damn it. Anyways, same classes you're used to, barbarian, but then you have paths. So you have Path of the Berserker, Path of the Wild Heart, Path of the World Tree, Path of the Zealot. That's new. We didn't have that in previous editions of the game. Not a revision. Then you have bards. Again, you have your schools and college of bards. You got your cleric, and you got your different types of clerics. Your druid, again, different types of druids. Fighter, monk, paladin, ranger, rogue, or thief is what I call it. Sorcerer, but thief is actually a type of rogue, finally. So, alright. Sorcerer, warlock, I'm not a fan of warlock, and wizard. Then you have character origins, is what they call it now, which is your background descriptions. Here's your backgrounds. And then your race that they call species. I'm gonna just keep calling it race, because species doesn't make sense. Because humans and dwarves and elves and halflings and gnomes can all bump uglies and make babies. They're the same species. They're different subspecies of that same species. They're different races. You know, they're different races of humans, different races of elves, etc., etc. They're not different species. A dog and a cat are 2 different species. An elf and a dwarf are not. Alright? So I have issues with that as well. Getting sick and tired of people being stupid. Chapter 5 is feats. Another change? You want another change that proves this is a new edition? Feats are not optional anymore. They were optional in 5th edition. And don't come at me with nobody ever played it like they were optional. I did. And I played in several groups that did too. In fact, I've only, out of the dozen games, different games I played of 5th edition, only one group ever implemented feats. So again, that's a major change. That's not an insignificant change. It's an entirely new edition. Chapter 6 is equipment. Also equipment. You start off with some type of specialized trinket that no other previous edition of the game gave you. The Dungeon Master tailors it to you, and it's story specific. That's something they've never done before. That's not compatible with 5th edition, making this 6th edition. The spells are entirely different. They're not the same spells. And then they go into the multiverse, which, they're still using the same, pathology, or I don't know what's the correct word, but they're still using the same cosmology, I guess is the correct word. So nothing changed there. And then they've got a section in the back with creature blocks, similar to how they did in 5th edition, where you could just sort of, here's some stat blocks. So you can get started while you wait for the monster manual and the Dungeon Master's guides to come out. I do believe the DMG comes out in December. I don't remember when the monster manual comes out, but this is an entirely new edition. Now, I know why Hasbro, vis-a-vis Wizards of the Coast, don't want to call this a new edition. 2 reasons. 1, because they promised us 5th edition, which they just call Dungeons & Dragons. According to Hasbro, the 2014 edition, which is why they call it the 2014 edition, was the last edition they were ever going to make. They're still trying to keep that lie, keep that promise. Even though they did lie, this is an entirely new edition. So that's number 1 reason why they call it 5th edition, or 2024 edition. But not even edition, just 2024, whatever. The second reason is, so many people have been invested in 5th edition for the last 10 years. They want those players to have a smooth and comfortable transition to the new ecosystem. So they have a stake in the game. You and I don't. So I'm going to call you an idiot to your face. I don't care who you are. Okay? Professor DM, Jenny D, Bob the World Builder. I know you guys are smarter than that, and I know Professor DM has already come out and said he prefers to call it 6th edition. He doesn't like call it 5.5. Here's why I cannot call it 5.5. Because if you take the 3.0 Player's Handbook and the 3.5 Player's Handbook and set them side by side, it's the same fucking book. Same cover, same intro, the pages are laid out in the same order, and it's more or less the same content page for page. The differences between 3.0 and 3.5 were clarifications. That's all it was. They just sort of clarified things that were ambiguous. This adds new content that did not exist in the previous edition. Therefore, it cannot be, by definition, a revision, because it's adding entirely new content that does not exist in the previous edition. And second of all, it fundamentally changes core components of the game that are incompatible without modification from previous editions of the game. And third, every version of D&D is compatible with modifications. You have to modify 5th edition material to work with 6th edition content. Thus, it's a new edition. And I have the fucking proof in my hand. So stop being an idiot!